You're on the air with Florenza, your podcast destination for authentic conversations with a twist. So, grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and join me on this unique literary journey. Cheers! Today, I'm thrilled to welcome author Reyna Marder Gentin here to talk about her gripping new novel, Jessica Harmon Has Stepped Away, a powerful, emotionally layered story about identity, reinvention, and what happens when walking away might be the bravest step of all. Please put your hands together and welcome Reyna to the show. Okay, so Reyna, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of On the Air with Florenza, where in just a few minutes, we are going to talk about your book, Jessica Harmon Has Stepped Away. Before we do, we're going to toast to an amazing show. And, I like your mug.
I'm toasting with coffee. I hope that's okay.
That's perfectly fine. It's 6:00 in the morning somewhere, so I start early. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
I did have coffee earlier. I think I had oh my goodness, I was probably on 4 cups.
Yeah.
So if I'm a little hype, which is
I'm
my
right there
normal.
with you. So yeah.
Now, Reyna, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your book, Jessica Harmon Has Stepped Away.
Thanks. So I was a practicing attorney for many years. I practiced criminal appeals, which means, appealing the judgments of people that have been convicted of felony crimes. And I loved it. I did it for a really long time. But at some point, I kind of hit the wall. And about 10 years ago, I quit my job. And I didn't really have any idea what I was going to be doing. And I got an invitation from a friend to go with her to a writing class at this university that I was talking about. And I went with her, and I was very skeptical because it was a memoir writing class, and I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be writing memoir. But I learned a lot, and I came out with a lot of pieces about different characters that were real characters, but I thought maybe I can turn this into fiction. And that's kind of how it started. This Jessica Harmon is my fourth book. I've written 2 other books for adults that were based in the legal world, and then one was a middle grade book about a girl with dyslexia. So Jessica Harmon is kind of a departure for me. It's a mother-daughter story. There's no law in the book, and that was hard. I had to work really hard to access the characters and to figure out what the story was going to be. And it's a mother-daughter story about 2 writers and the effect that the mother's fame has had on the daughter's life.
Nice. What a beautiful array of genres in there as well, from the middle grade to now the women's fiction. What were you able to draw from when you first came up with the idea of Jessica Harmon and the mother-daughter relationship? Was there anything personal going on that you thought, you know what? I want to tell this story, but I can't tell it on you, Mom. So I'm going to make a character.
No, nothing like that. And it is the first question everybody asks. And if anybody reads the book, she's a tough cookie, the mother. And honestly, I think that there are parts that everybody can relate to when a mother is critical or when a mother is acting as, a mentor, maybe with a little bit of a tough edge. But this mother is definitely not my mother. But I think, part of that was even drawing on the good parts I had with the relationship with my mother and kind of flipping them on their head.
Yeah.
My mother was a very kind of caring, and I don't want to say a soft person. She was a strong person, but in her mothering,
she was
soft.
nurturing.
She was nurturing, and she has 3 daughters, and, she was all there for all of us. And that did give me a way to kind of flip that. What would somebody's life be like who didn't have somebody who was that supportive and who was that nurturing? So yeah, I
Yeah,
would say it was more of a reverse than an actual.
I like that. Stepping away from the legal world to delve into more women fiction, how terrified were you? Because you had cut your teeth in the legal world, and that was, that was your salt. What were some of the internal dialogues that you had stepping into this completely new genre?
Yeah, I was really anxious to get away from the legal stuff. It was fantastic when I was writing my first books because I was able to delve in and, really get the details right and follow the course of a case so that it gave the book structure that this, I had to do something completely different with. But it was scary. You're right. I mean, I felt not in the sense a lot of people will say don't change genres because it does something bad for your career.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that way. I'm almost 60 years old. I'm doing this because I love it. Like this is
Yes.
not about, my career so much. So I wasn't really worried about that, but I was more worried about how do you make it work? How do you
Yeah.
follow a story? How do you figure out where it's supposed to go? And I kind of substituted a little bit instead of the cases. I substituted this book tour. It follows the mother and daughter on a book tour and what happens, and that was kind of a way to give it a little shape.
Yeah. And it's something powerful about being 60, where you're at, when I turned 60, it was just this, I've always been sassy. It just comes par for the
Yeah,
course, man. But oh, something beautiful happened when I turned 60. You just don't care.
yeah, it's a little bit like that. Yeah.
It is. So, Jessica Harmon Has Stepped Away, as we were just saying, centers on a mother-daughter duo whose relationship is beautifully complex and quietly combustible.
Mm.
We talked about what inspired you to this story. What is it that you want the readers to walk away with having read the book?
Um, I would say a sense that your life is in your control, that there
Mm,
may be a lot that you come at life with, a lot of baggage. Jessica, the daughter, comes at life with a lot of baggage, and she is angry and she's bitter, and she blames her mother for many of her own. I don't want to say failures, but her inability to do the things she wants to do with her life, including finding love. And she's not wrong. It's not that she's wrong, but you have to turn that around at some point,
yeah.
right? You have to say, like, this cannot be the way I'm going to go through life. I have to reclaim. And that's part of the stepping away in the book. And I don't want to give anything away, but you kind of at some point, I think if you are having that experience and you're having the victim experience, you have to say, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. And
Yes.
that's I hope what people come away with.
That leads right into this question. Your legal background must have shaped the way that you see conflict, truth, and justice. How does that sensibility show up in your fiction, especially in the quiet moral dilemmas your characters face?
Wow, that's a fascinating question and a very hard question. I think it showed up for sure in the books that were more centered on the law in a very obvious way. The first book centered on the public defender who has feelings for one of her clients, and that's a tough that's a tough ethical dilemma, especially when you're representing somebody who was convicted of a very nasty crime.
Right.
So it definitely came up in that book and in the second book. Here, I think there is something to saying that when you are relating to your family members, you have to know where you can push the
Yeah.
bounds, right? Like
Yeah.
she needs in some ways to get away from her mother if she's going to live a certain life for
Yeah.
herself, but it's still her mother,
Yeah.
right? And in a lot of ways, she is still very attached and very much wants her approval. That's a
Yeah.
huge thing, right? We all want our mother's approval.
Yeah.
And, she needs to figure out how to do that in a way that I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody. It probably in the end maybe doesn't work for her mother so well, but it's got to work for her. And she doesn't want to be cruel. She doesn't want
Yeah.
to turn into somebody that acts like her mother, right?
Yes.
So,
That's mhm.
she's working with a lot of restrictions in some ways, but also the world is open to her. She needs to reinvent herself.
Yeah. I love that. I love how you use the book tour road trip as both a literal and emotional journey. If you and Cynthia Harmon hit the
Oh,
road together, what do you think you learn from each other?
wow. Um, I mean, one of the big things about Cynthia Harmon is that she's incredibly talented.
Hmm.
She is a woman that is world renowned, not, not for nothing, right? I mean, so I hope maybe I would learn some of her discipline, some of the way she approaches her art.
Hmm.
Um, I think that would be fantastic. What would she learn from me? I hope she would learn how to be a little more human in her relationships, right? I mean, she is beyond a tough cookie. I mean, I remember at one point I was working with my editor and she said, "This woman is a monster." And I thought, okay, she's not a monster. Like if you think she's
Hmm.
a monster, you're going to miss half the story.
Mm,
But she's something.
yeah,
And you don't want to learn that. But so I would hope that maybe she would learn some humanity from me.
love that. When you're writing an emotionally intense scene, do you approach it like you're cross-examining a witness methodically, or like you're sculpting something fragile and unpredictable?
Mm. I think writing emotional scenes is one of the really hardest things you can do. At one point, I was trying to write a scene where Jessica. It suggested that Jessica participate in a reading that her mother's giving on the tour, and she knows her mother's not going to go for it because that's not the kind of thing her mother does. But once the idea comes to her, it starts to grow in her own mind and like, wow, wouldn't I like to get up there and read a little of my work with my mother? Wouldn't that be
Huh?
great? And her mother, and eventually it gets broached, and her mother says, "That would be the worst kind of nepotism to have you up there on that stage with me. These people have paid to come see me read." And she's devastated. And Jessica, and writing that scene was really hard. I
Yeah.
kind of really had to bring it up. Like, what would that feel like? And the
Mhm.
first couple times I wrote it, it was kind of tepid. And then some of the early readers said, like, if they are going to have this fight, it has to be all out. She has to
Yeah.
say everything she's always wanted to say to
Yes.
her mother about the way she is. And she
Yes.
does. She
Yeah.
she lets it rip. And it was satisfying to write, but it was hard.
Yeah.
I'm not used to having fights like that, and I'm not used to laying it out on paper. And
Yeah.
but it felt good, and it felt good for Jessica. It probably did not feel too good for her mom, but
Uh-huh.
it's okay.
After you wrote such an emotionally intense scene, did you have to step away for a minute and just ground yourself, or did you stay in that energy to keep going?
I try to keep going. I mean, I knew the next scene for Jessica was going to have to be a cooling down scene. Like she could not,
Hmm.
you can't go from that to like, I don't know, racing off and dealing with somebody else because
Right.
you're gonna screw that up. So for me, her next scene was more reflective. She tells her friend about what happens. She, tries to figure out her next steps. What do you do after you have a blowout like that?
Yeah.
So I think because the next scenes themselves had to be quieter,
Yeah.
it was okay for me to get quieter also.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. What's one line, image, or scene in Jessica Harmon Has Stepped Away that still lingers with you long after you type the words "the end"?
Oh wow. Um, there's a scene where Jessica, I don't want to ruin anything, but she discloses a particularly bad interaction she's had with her mother. She discloses it to somebody else, and that whole scene was it's painful. I mean, she
Yeah.
goes through what happened and what her mother did or didn't do in reaction, um, and that kind of stays with me.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine that. You've had several beautifully received novels before this one. My Name is Layla, and Both Are True, among others. In what ways does Jessica Harmon Has Stepped Away mark a new chapter for you as a storyteller?
We've discussed it a little bit. For sure, stepping away from the law was new for me. My Name is Layla actually is the middle grade book, and that was very different for me too. So I like changing things up. I don't, I know what I'm working on next, and it's different. So I think it's good to change things up. I think you can get in a rut, and I think that some of the most successful authors that I know are doing the same.
Yeah.
They found what works,
Yeah.
and they've got contracts to write one after another, and good for them. Like if I found something that really worked for me and worked for my readers, I'd also do it again and again. But that haven't hasn't happened to me yet. And I don't mind right now. I don't mind switching it up. Like for me, I just write what I'm interested in. So
Yeah. Yeah. Having started writing later in your career path, how differently do you think this journey would be for you had you started it earlier?
mm. I think I would have gone about it in a more business-like way, probably. And I get why that could have helped. I might have focused in a way on how do I get an agent? How do I, move into certain things? And it's not that I haven't tried, I have,
Yeah.
but like I think if I started as really as a young person, that this was my career,
Yeah.
I think I would have approached it differently.
Hmm.
I don't want to say more seriously. I think I take my writing seriously, but I don't take myself that
Yeah.
seriously. And I think that that would have been different. Like if I had said like, I'm 30 years old and this is what I'm doing with my life, I probably would have gotten an MFA. I
Hmm.
probably would have said, I've got to study this a lot more. I've got to, and I kind of feel like I was freed from
Yeah.
that by taking it up later because now
Yeah.
I do what I want. So,
Yes. Talking to a young writer today with exactly what you just said, because that right there is gold. To understand that in that creative space, it is okay to look at it differently. There is no one path for
mhm.
writing, right? Like you, I came into it late in life and it was just kind of like, oh, this is pretty darn cool. And I'm having fun and kept that aspect of it. And the agents came later and the contracts came later. But the fun element has always been my earmark for it. What
Mhm.
would you say to a young writer who, like you, they really want to tell stories and they don't necessarily want to go the other path with it?
Right. Um, for me, like taking some classes was critical. I didn't in the end feel like I needed to do an MFA. That seemed like a lot of time and energy and money, and I wasn't sure exactly what I would get out of it. Although I mean, obviously people do, and I'm sure it's
Yeah,
great. But again, I was an older writer, already have a graduate degree, like I didn't really feel the need. But the other hand, being in class and meeting other people and learning about what other people are writing and what their process is, I think that's invaluable. So I would definitely say, that would be one piece of advice I would give. And then I think the other is, you just got to do it. I know that sounds
yeah,
very simple minded, but even if you take, like my teacher always says, even if you write for 20 minutes a day,
yeah,
just do 20 minutes, set a timer and just let it out. And, not that every word will be exactly right and not that you won't have to go back and fix and all this stuff. But if you write for 20 minutes, you're going to have whatever, 400 words down. And that's pretty good. That's a pretty
yeah.
good start to whatever you're working on. And,
Hmm.
I don't always follow it. I wish I were more disciplined to do that, but it's great advice.
Yeah.
And, that's definitely advice I would pass on.
Excellent. Where are the listeners able to engage with you and follow you and become a fan?
So they can look at my website. That would be great. It's just reynamardergentin.com. Um, and I'm on Instagram at Reyna Marder Gentin. I'm on Facebook. I'm basically at all the places. So I would love, and I love interacting with readers. So if anybody wants to say hi, that would be great.
Just come on up and say hey.
Yeah.
Okay. We have come to the part of our show that I call One for the Road. We're going to take a sip because we've been talking.
Okay. I'm going to go with my water this time.
Yes.
I got a lot of
Actually,
drinks.
I have some water somewhere. And my listeners are used to a whole lot of drinking. I kind of started the show after the Kathy Lee and Hoda deal. Those two ladies were always drinking before every show. And listen, that scale started screaming, girl. So,
Yeah.
girl talk. I just take a few sips and then I pour it back in my bottle. I have several bottles that are only for the show. They just sit to the side. Okay. I am looking for my end questions because I've got such good ones. Okay. Which character from your own books would you never want to argue with in court? Cynthia.
Cynthia. I'd have to go with Cynthia.
Yeah. What's your favorite writing soundtrack? Is it silence, jazz, or courtroom drama reruns?
No, I don't. I have to be quiet. I'm silent.
Oh, are you? You're
Yeah,
silent.
yeah,
I have to have a lot of noise. I am a Gemini, and if it's too silent, then my brain starts filling in the silence. And before I know it, I am creating a story about what's going on in my house in the silence instead
yeah.
of what my characters are going through.
That's funny.
True or false? You sometimes edit your drafts as if they were closing arguments.
True, in the sense I try to make them persuasive, right?
Nice. Um, would you rather? Would you rather argue a case before the Supreme Court again or pitch your next novel to a Hollywood producer?
Oh, definitely the latter. But I never argued a case in front of the Supreme Court, so I don't know. That would be pretty exciting. But
It does sound exciting. And our last one, would you rather your books be adapted into a film or a limited streaming series? And if so, who would you want to play Jessica?
I don't. I would say a streaming because I like that. I watch that at home, but I don't know. I in my head, she looks a little bit Sarah Jessica Parker. I don't know. I don't know why, but
Yeah,
I'm not so good at that.
yeah, yeah, that sounds great. Well, thank you, Reyna, for joining me. This has been amazing. And I know that your
Thank
book
you.
is coming out, but I also know that you are working on something new. Can you give us a little bit about what it is, or is it top secret and only people with high security clearance can find out?
No, it's not top secret. I'm working on a novel and stories. So it's linked short stories about a 24-hour diner and the 21-year-old waitress who works the night shift.
Oh, completely turn.
Completely different.
I
And I
love
love
that.
writing short stories. Short stories are such fun. So
Nice. Well, we will look out for that. Do you have a
thank you.
projected published date or you're just like having
No, not
fun
yet. Still working.
creating?
Still working.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jessica. Girl, if
What?
I call you Jessica, that's my
It's
daughter's
okay.
name
Oh, that's funny.
and it's stuck
Okay.
in my head. So thank you so
Yeah.
much, Reyna.
Thanks for having me.
And this wraps up another episode of On the Air with Florenza. You may follow me on all social media platforms under Florenza Lee or via my website at florenza.org. Until next time, cheers.